Today I'm inside a 2022 Ford Mustang Mach-E GT, and this is the first time I've been able to spend an entire week in a car with Ford's new BlueCruise semi-autonomous driving system. Before we get on the freeway, let's talk about what BlueCruise is and what BlueCruise is not. The first thing to know is that BlueCruise is not a competitor to Autopilot or Tesla's full self-driving. Instead, this is a competitor to Cadillac Supercruise, also going to be seen on Chevy products, GMC products, etc. That's an important distinction because unlike Autopilot, this is a hands-off-the-wheel system. Tesla's Autopilot system is a hands-on-the-wheel steering assist system. It's basically aggressive lane centering with a few other tricks up its sleeve. But the important part is it's hands on the steering wheel all the time. Full self-driving is the attempt to go from point A to point B completely autonomously. That is not what we see in BlueCruise or in Cadillac Supercruise. These two systems are somewhere between worlds in a way. For 2022, BlueCruise is going to be available on the Mach-E and the Ford F-150, and it's going to be spreading across the Ford lineup in relatively short order. The big thing to know, however, is that at least for the moment, it is much more available than Supercruise. Supercruise has actually been paused on a few General Motors models, and generally speaking, you're going to find it at a less expensive price point in Ford's models than we see in most of the Cadillac models. There's also another thing to keep in mind. Cadillac has Supercruise version 2.0 basically, and what we see on the Chevy Bolt EUV, that is Supercruise version 1.0 essentially. So keep in mind that the Supercruise system that you find in a $100,000 Escalade is not the same Supercruise system that you find in the relatively inexpensive Bolt EUV. And it's possible that GM might have a few different versions of Supercruise kicking around. Now that we're out here on Interstate 680, let's go ahead and set the system up. So I just turn on radar adaptive cruise control. It says BlueCruise is on. Then I just take my hands off the steering wheel. The system functions based on sensors and cameras around the vehicle and a driver monitoring system. And that is the key difference between this and, say, Tesla's Autopilot. The Autopilot system does not do any sort of driver monitoring as far as driver attention monitoring. All it's doing is monitoring to make sure that your hands are on the steering wheel every now and then. And if you spend too much time with your hands off the wheel, the system will cancel. This system actually make sure that your eyes are looking at the road in front. You can spend a little bit of time looking sideways. Don't worry, I do have someone in the passenger seat to help make sure that things are going right. We'll see how long it takes. There we go. It says watch the road there. So it's about 20 or 30 seconds. Definitely a lot of things can go wrong in a semi-autonomous system like this in that 20 or 30 seconds, but that's part of the point of this style of system, is to give you a little bit more confidence on those long journeys. As with the Supercruise system that we find in GM vehicles, BlueCruise is dependent on having LiDAR mapped roads. At the moment, there are a little over 100,000 miles of approved mapped roads for BlueCruise, but Ford does not provide an easy way to really determine which roads those are. You'll find them out when the system says, hey, you can enable me. There is a map on their media site that shows approximately where those mapped roads are, but exact details again are a little bit sketchy. At the moment, Supercruise offers about double the number of mapped roads. A key difference between BlueCruise and Supercruise is that BlueCruise does not offer any sort of lane changing assistance. So if you want to change lanes, you have to do that yourself, and then the system will then re-engage when it's safe to do so. You'll also notice, as you probably just saw there on this little camera view where I'm pointing, that BlueCruise will enable and disable itself without as much of an alert, I guess you'd say, as some other systems. So right now the system is just in regular lane tracing assistant. We have the blue line around the car right there, the little hands on the wheel icon to tell you that your hand should be on the steering wheel. Now this is a fairly aggressive lane centering system, and on this particular ramp, for instance, I could let my hands off the steering wheel for just a little bit there. Right now I'm just hovering. The car is actually taking this lane line pretty well, but this is not BlueCruise. BlueCruise has a different icon. We're now on US 101, so the system should re-engage itself here in just a moment. You'll notice, again, I have that blue outline around the car, and after a few moments here, it should detect that we're on an approved road and everything is hunky-dory to go. And now you can see that the hands-free system has engaged. A nice touch with this system is that you can keep your hands on the wheel and steer if you want to, and it will give you the most aggressive lane centering possible. So if you're in an area where you're not quite sure what the car could be up to, you can just hold your hands on the steering wheel. Or like Supercruise, you could just take your hands off the wheel. You should know that this system is really intended for long distance travel. So it's meant to be a fatigue reducing device for going from San Francisco to Los Angeles, or Houston, Texas to San Antonio, etc. Those longer highway journeys. It's not really meant for use inside cities. And I have seen a lot of reviewers out there rake Cadillac Supercruise or Ford's Blue Cruise across the coals for not behaving properly in city-type highway situations. It's not really meant for that. This is not meant for tight, winding freeways. It's meant for those long stretches of interstate, and again, sort of a fatigue reduction device. Now on to my complaints. My first complaint about Blue Cruise is that we don't have an easy method of communicating with the driver, in my opinion. If I'm looking at the road, as I'm supposed to be looking at the road here, then my eyes are not really glancing down here at the instrument cluster where it's currently saying, again, hands-free, has that little multi-circle icon there around the car. When the system decides it needs to disengage itself, it has a little tone and then that goes away and it just goes back to regular lane centering mode. And that's just not as useful as the big light up bar on the steering wheel that we find in Cadillac Supercruise. And that seems to be what GM is going to be doing on all the brands that have Supercruise. Logically, just having this LCD and the sensor module right below the LCD that's monitoring my face, making sure that I'm looking forward, is less expensive than that same combination of things, plus a big light up bar on the steering wheel and all the associated wiring for that. But that does really help tell the driver what's going on. The light up bar on GM steering wheel lights up in 3 basic colors to tell you the system is available, the system is functioning, and hey, you need to take control of the vehicle immediately. We don't have that same level of warning here in the Mach-E, and I do wish that it had something a little bit more aggressive to say, hey, you need to take over now. As you can see out on US 101 in this area in South San Jose, the freeway gently curves from left to right, but it's overall fairly straight. And the lane lines are pretty straight on as well. But I do sense that Blue Cruise is sort of wandering a little bit around in the lane, a little bit more than we find in the latest version of Supercruise. A little bit better, however, than the first generation of Supercruise. As I've passed larger vehicles on the right side, I've also noticed that Blue Cruise doesn't tend to move over a little bit within the lane when you're passing those larger vehicles. And that's something that General Motors has recently added to Supercruise to help make it feel a little bit more natural. If you're coming up on a semi, sure, you're still in the center of your lane, but that system will deliberately move you over just a little bit so that way it feels a little bit more natural. We're coming upon a construction zone here where there's a barrier, so I'm just going to go ahead and pop my hands on the steering wheel again to see what the car does, because in situations where the lane lines jog to the right and then back to the left, or perhaps they've been modified as we see here, the system could be a little bit smoother. It does tend to sort of be very exacting in trying to stay in the middle of the lane markings. That's something that I've noticed on some of the highways around here where construction has recently happened, but they haven't gone back and repainted the lane lines. Say the lane line on a freeway overpass is still there and it's a little bit inboard of where the lane line for the rest of the roadway is. The car will try and jog over that 18 inches and then back on the other side, and it does feel quite abrupt. It's not going to do what humans would do, which is just to sort of cut that curve and stay right in the center of the approximate lines. Now, having said that, I don't consider that construction zone an intervention because the system did remain enabled the entire time, even though I had my hands on the steering wheel. It didn't feel like it was tugging in any particular direction there, but that is something that I've noticed on other road surfaces during the week that I've had this. Total, I've spent about 250 miles in Blue Cruise, and interventions seem to be a little bit more common than with Supercruise. Again, I'm talking about the latest version. As you can see right here, the car has actually canceled Blue Cruise, but I didn't get any real warning there, and that's one of my complaints. I was staring at the road straight ahead, it canceled, and then it started dinging at me that my hands needed to be on the steering wheel. I consider that a bit of a safety problem, because if you're looking straight ahead and you're sort of mesmerized by the road, as can happen with any of these hands-off-the-wheel steering wheel systems, the car really needs to be eager in telling you, hey, you need to take control of the vehicle now. I'm no longer driving myself. And of course, the system has now regained its hands-free mode. We'll see how it handles this merge right up here. Traffic on the left side is merging into my lane, and of course we have a minivan that's kind of weaving around in its lane right over there. So far, so good. It actually stayed basically where I would hope the system would stay, which is towards the right side of that merging lane as it came in. It felt like it corrected a little bit there as that lane came in, but overall pretty good. On the West Coast, especially in California, there are a reasonable number of road surfaces where rather than painted lines, they simply have box dots on the road surface itself. Sometimes singly, sometimes in groups of 3 or 4. And those make up the lane markings. In those situations, some camera systems can get confused about exactly where the lane is and where it isn't. We're now in a bit of stop and go traffic. Let's see how the system handles things. So far it's doing a good job at lane centering. Ford's adaptive cruise control system definitely likes to keep a slightly larger gap than some of the newer adaptive distance systems that we see out there, especially from Hyundai and Kia. They're getting a little bit more aggressive at tightening up that gap between the car you're in and the car in front of you. But I think this makes me at least a little bit more comfortable for a system that's doing the driving itself. I'm now headed north on US 101, and this right-hand lane is honestly very badly paved. Let's hang out here for a while, however, and see how the system does at somewhat lower speeds, but with traffic possibly coming in on the right side, and of course, all those freeway entrances and exits. The left-hand lane is often the easiest lane for lane centering systems like this, because generally speaking, the lane markings tend to be more consistent and the road surface a little bit more perfect, so there's less steering force for the system to have to worry about. I can already tell on this less than perfect road surface that the car is massaging itself around in the lane a little bit more, and with these freeway entrances, the car tends to veer a little over to the right and then self-correct over to the left. Ooh, there's definitely a little bit of wobble going on there. Oh, system is still engaged, but I did end up hovering over the steering wheel there for just a little bit to make sure that it functioned properly. Again, when the lane markings are less than perfect, lane centering systems that are depending on lane markings for their actions, they're going to have a little bit of a problem now and then. I've now moved one lane over to the left. Let's see how the system functions in this lane where there's traffic to the left and traffic to the right. Ford has not been overly specific about exactly how much data BlueCruise uses when it's in operation. Any way you slice it, however, BlueCruise is going to require an ongoing subscription in order to maintain its functionality. There is a basic trial period included with any vehicle that has the capability on board, and then after that trial period is over, you'll have to pay to keep the system functional. In case you're wondering, we see essentially the same thing with Supercruise and the Lexus Teammate system that's going to be debuting on Lexus LS models shortly. As I noted before, BlueCruise is wobbling around in this lane a little bit, and I also noticed again that it doesn't move over to the left a little when you pass those larger trucks on the right side. Oh, it veered off to the right there for I'm not quite clear what reason. I'm not sure if it was distracted by that little Lexus hatchback that decided to go around there on the right side or not, but it did stay in the lane. It never left the lane. It just sort of veered over to the right side there. At least for the moment, bottom lining BlueCruise is pretty easy for me. This is absolutely the kind of system I want on my next Ford, but simultaneously, this needs a bit more time in the oven. It comes across as a little bit underbaked. I'm not necessarily bothered by the car's tendency to wander around a little bit within its lane, but what I am bothered by, again, are the lack of more prominent auditory and visual signals that the system has disengaged. I would really love to see the LCD instrument cluster blink or something, or turn red, or have a heads-up display in vehicles that have this system that could flash at you, or some other easy visual warning that the system needs you to take over right away. Because sometimes, again, I just did it on the video here where I was talking to you and I was looking straight ahead, just as I might do with a passenger in the vehicle, where the system disengaged and I wasn't aware of it. I was still in my lane and I didn't think I was in an unsafe situation, but I also didn't know that the car was no longer handling all the steering theoretically for me. Let me know what you think about all that down there in the comment section below. And of course, check out my full review of this Mustang Mach-E GT. You'll find that over on the EV Buyer's Guide channel, and that would be youtube.com/c/EV Buyer's Guide. There's also a link down there in the description section of this video for that channel. You'll find more and more EV content and various kinds of EV content going on over there very, very soon. I'll talk to all of you later.